For centuries, you were told that history begins with us, the first fires, the first metals, the first engines. But what if that confidence is only a flicker in a vast, unlit chamber? What if the chamber is older than the light itself? In 2018, two scientists asked a question that sounds like a rumor, but isn't. If an industrial civilization existed long before humans, would the Earth remember? Not in legends, in chemistry. They called it the Silurian Hypothesis. Not proof, a method. Stop searching for shattered statues. Start reading the planet the way a forensic lab reads ash. Hunt for the signatures that survive every eraser. Sudden heat frozen in carbon isotopes. Oxygen that vanished from ancient seas. Metallic microspheres hardened in midair. Stubborn compounds sunlight could never kill. They will not speak, but the data will. And if the same curve rises twice, once for us, once for something older, could that be the truth they never wanted you to find? You are standing in a place no sunlight has touched for millions of years. The air is heavy, almost damp, carrying the mineral scent of a world older than memory. Around you, the rock walls rise like frozen waves of time. Each layer, a chapter pressed flat and silent. Geologists call this a sedimentary record, a book written not in ink, but in stone. You might expect these layers to be filled with nothing but shells, fossils, and the slow signatures of ancient seas. And yet, sometimes they hold something else, something that should not be there. Imagine running your hand along the rough surface of a cliff and feeling something smooth, metallic, embedded like a splinter in the planet's skin. At first glance, it could be dismissed as a quirk of mineral formation. But under a microscope, it reveals itself to be a sphere, perfectly round, with a texture that suggests it was forged, not formed. These are not the relics of our age. They are not debris from industry, nor fallout from our recent wars. Their chemical fingerprint, the ratio of certain isotopes, tells a stranger story. They are older than humanity itself, much older. Some, lodged in rock strata 65 million years old, predate the rise of mammals, belonging instead to a time when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. The arrangement of these metallic spheres across the globe is even more unsettling. They mirror a pattern we know all too well: the distribution of microscopic debris after nuclear detonations. In our time, these patterns are a grim byproduct of atomic tests, but here, locked in ancient stone, they exist in a world where no humans walked the Earth. If you follow them on a map, you find yourself tracing invisible scars across continents and oceans, as if someone, or something, had once unleashed planetary-scale technology, only for its memory to be erased by time. The official explanation is cautious, even dismissive. Scientists speak of meteorite impacts, volcanic processes, the slow alchemy of geology. And yet, the precision of the spheres, the uniformity of their composition, and the sheer improbability of their distribution gnaw at the edges of those neat conclusions. It's as if the Earth itself is holding a secret in plain sight, whispering it through the language of anomalies. You start to wonder, if these spheres are not natural, then someone, or something, put them here. But who? And how advanced must they have been to leave behind artifacts so durable that not even 65 million years of geological pressure could crush them to dust? Look closely. The rock does not lie. It may forget names, faces, and entire civilizations, but it remembers impact. Every grain of sand, every compressed layer of clay is a witness, and some witnesses refuse to stay silent. You recall the way myths sometimes speak, of gods who came before, of builders who shaped the land in an age when the world was not yet ours? Somewhere beneath your feet, deeper than the reach of drills or sonar, the bedrock still holds its breath. You have the sense that if you could peel back every layer, the story would unfold in a single, impossible sentence. We were here before you. You have seen the photographs. Mushrooms of fire blooming over deserts, skies bruised with shock waves, a horizon trembling under the weight of human ambition. We call it the Atomic Age, and it began less than a century ago. Yet in the deep archive of the planet, there are signatures that look disturbingly familiar and impossibly old. In certain rock strata, sand grains are fused into glass, not the kind born from lightning strikes or volcanic fury, but something purer, hotter, faster. Geologists call it trinitite when they find it in the ruins of our own nuclear tests. But when you dig into Cretaceous or Permian layers and see the same glassy textures, the same microscopically welded minerals, the comparison is hard to ignore. And then there are the isotopes, strange ratios of uranium, thorium, and plutonium that do not occur naturally in such abundance. In our time, these are the fingerprints of reactors, warheads, or accidents. In their time, they should not exist at all. Some samples from ancient sediment beds show spikes of cesium and strontium isotopes, elements with half-lives long enough to survive in trace amounts across millions of years, if they were ever unleashed. Mainstream explanations bend toward comfort. Perhaps a meteor strike could generate such heat. Perhaps volcanic events scattered heavy metals in odd configurations. But there is a line where perhaps begins to sound like an apology, an attempt to keep the past in a box it no longer fits. Because alongside these chemical scars are tiny metallic spheres, cooled in midair, their surfaces rippled like droplets caught in an explosion. Under high magnification, they reveal the same flow lines and rapid cooling structures found in fallout debris from modern detonations. These clues are not clustered in one site. They appear in distant points across the globe: South African gold mines, ancient riverbeds in India, deep cores from the Pacific seafloor. When charted, they sketch a constellation of burn marks on the planet's skin, each one separated by oceans and millions of years, yet echoing the same event profile. You begin to see the shape of a possibility. What if there was another atomic age, one not written in our history books? A time when a different kind of intelligence, perhaps not human at all, learned to split the atom and harness its terrible light, only to vanish, leaving behind nothing but the ghostly imprint of its shadow in stone. Our own weapons leave scars that will outlast our cities. The carbon spikes, the altered isotopes, the vitrified sands. They are our accidental time capsules. If another species, eons from now, were to analyze our rocks, they would read the same grim signature we now glimpse in the ancient past. And maybe, just maybe, that is the point. You expect lost cities to look like the ones in adventure films: crumbling temples in the jungle, streets swallowed by sand, half-buried statues staring into the void. But those are the ruins we can still touch, the ones that belong to our timeline. What about the ruins that sank so far into the past that even the continents themselves have moved since they were built? What about cities that do not lie under dust or vines, but under miles of ocean? In the cold silence of the abyssal plains, cameras on submersibles have caught glimpses of something unsettling. Stone blocks aligned with impossible precision, staircases leading nowhere, pavements made from cut slabs, too regular, too symmetrical to be random. Some researchers dismiss these as natural formations, columnar basalt, fractured seabed, tricks of the light. But in certain locations, the geometry is too consistent, the angles too clean. Nature favors curves and chaos. Here, there is intent. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, lies a formation that has divided geologists for decades. Massive terraces, straight-edged walls, and what looks like a stepped pyramid rise from the seafloor. Some claim it is the product of tectonic uplift shaped by erosion. Others see the outlines of a drowned city, complete with plazas and roads. And if Yonaguni stood above water in a forgotten age, who walked those streets? Farther into the Pacific, sonar has mapped rectangular anomalies scattered across otherwise featureless seafloor, each roughly the size of a city block. In the Atlantic, just beyond the mid-Atlantic ridge, there are ridges and depressions that match the grid-like patterns of urban planning. No definitive proof ties these to intelligent builders, but the patterns repeat often enough to trouble the certainty of chance. On land, the evidence hides beneath younger worlds. In the deserts of Namibia, ground-penetrating radar has revealed buried walls under layers of sand so ancient they predate the last ice age. In the Amazon, LiDAR scans have cut through the jungle canopy to expose vast geometric earthworks, circles, squares, and causeways connecting them like a network. Mainstream archaeology ties these to human societies from a few thousand years ago. But what if those earthworks follow the ghost lines of something older, something the forest has been keeping for millions of years? There's a detail the Silurian Hypothesis asks you to consider. Civilizations vanish in layers. First, the surface structures collapse. Then the softer materials rot away. Stone endures longer, but even it fractures, sinks, or is ground to dust by glaciers. In 10 million years, even skyscrapers would be gone. What would survive are the subtlest things. The way certain metals refuse to corrode entirely. The faint magnetic anomalies left by former power grids. The chemical traces in the soil where cities once breathed and burned. Nothing but wilderness or waves. But the ground beneath your feet could be compacted in ways that soil should not be, or enriched with minerals in ratios that make no geological sense. Those are the shadows of vanished cities, not visible to the eye, but etched into the very structure of the earth. And here is the thought you can't quite shake. If these are indeed the remains of a civilization long before us, then we are the second or perhaps the third tenant to sign our name on this planet's lease. And history, it seems, has a habit of erasing old tenants without warning. The name sounds like a science fiction plot, the Silurian Hypothesis. But it was coined in a peer-reviewed paper, not in the pages of a pulp magazine. In 2018, two scientists, Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, asked the question almost no one in their field dared to frame. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years before humans, would we be able to detect it today? They did not claim such a civilization existed. They were not hunting for Atlantean ruins or alien outposts. Instead, they approached the problem like forensic investigators arriving at a crime scene long after the crime. The body, the civilization, was gone. The room, the earth, had been scrubbed clean by erosion, tectonics, and time. But what about the traces no cleaning could erase? The key, they argued, is not in monuments or artifacts. Those crumble and vanish within tens of thousands of years. The key lies in the planet's long-term chemical memory, the persistent fingerprints left in sediments, ice cores, and fossilized soils. Civilization, in their view, is a geochemical event. It changes the ratios of carbon isotopes in the atmosphere, alters the nitrogen cycle through agriculture, spreads synthetic compounds that nature did not invent, and deposits metals in concentrations far beyond natural background levels. The Silurian Hypothesis takes its name from a fictional reptilian race in the British TV series Doctor Who, an ancient, intelligent species said to have ruled Earth in the Silurian period, long before humans appeared. But the name is a hook. The core is method. It asks if we can detect our own industrial impact now, in the form of the so-called Anthropocene layer, could we find a similar layer from a civilization that flourished 50 million or 100 million years ago? The unsettling part is that our industrial footprint, if compressed into the deep future, would not look like ruins. It would look like anomalies, a sudden spike in carbon from burning fossil fuels, traces of plastics and other synthetic polymers embedded in sediments, heavy metal concentrations in unexpected places, unusual isotope ratios in oxygen and nitrogen. These signals could persist for millions of years, long after buildings and bones are gone. Schmidt and Frank suggested looking for these signals in the geological record, not just for the recent past but for eras far beyond human memory. Could the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, a mysterious warming event 56 million years ago, have been driven not by volcanic activity but by the industrial emissions of an earlier civilization? Mainstream science leans toward natural explanations, but the hypothesis forces a mental shift. It's not about proving an ancient civilization existed, but about developing the tools to recognize one if it did. The more you think about it, the more it rearranges your sense of time. Humanity's industrial phase has lasted barely 2 centuries. If another species had their own 2-century run, say 70 million years ago, their entire existence could be compressed into a thin line of chemical oddities in the rock record. And unless you knew exactly what to look for, you might walk right over it, never realizing you were stepping on the gravestone of a civilization as advanced, or more advanced, than ours. The Silurian Hypothesis is not a romantic story about lost golden ages. It is a cold, scientific reminder of how thin and fragile our footprint may be. And if such a civilization did exist and vanish without a trace, we recognize. The next question is inevitable. What erased them? And will it erase us too? You have seen fossils in museums, the orderly bones of creatures long gone, displayed in neat rows under glass. They are comfortingly familiar: the skeleton of a fish, the curled shell of an ammonite, the towering frame of a dinosaur. They fit within the story you were told. Life evolves, life dies, and the shapes it leaves behind tell the sequence of that journey. But sometimes a fossil does not fit. Sometimes a fragment in the rock whispers of something the timeline refuses to accept. In a South African mine, geologists once found a metallic sphere embedded in 3-billion-year-old pyrophyllite. Officially, it's a natural concretion, but under microscopic analysis, its grooves are too precise, its symmetry too deliberate, as if machined. In Illinois coal seams, miners uncovered what appeared to be a metal screw locked inside solid rock that formed hundreds of millions of years before humans. Explanations ranged from contamination to misidentification, yet the image lingers, a spiral thread etched in stone older than mammals. More disturbing are the fossils that hint at biological designs nature should not have been capable of at the time. In certain layers of shale, paleontologists have found microfossils of organisms with cell structures far more complex than anything else in their era. Complexity that appears abruptly, without a slow evolutionary buildup. Evolution can leap, yes, but here the leap feels engineered. There are also anomalies in isotopic composition within fossilized remains, carbon and nitrogen ratios that suggest these creatures lived in an environment artificially altered. In modern times, such anomalies can result from large-scale agriculture, industrial emissions, or synthetic fertilizers. If these fossils truly predate humans by tens of millions of years, what could have caused such environmental fingerprints? And then there are the hybrid puzzles. Bones that carry traits from species separated by millions of years of evolutionary distance, embedded in strata that should not allow such overlaps. Most are dismissed as misidentified or deformed specimens. But if you step back, they resemble the kind of genetic mosaics one might expect if a technologically capable species experimented with life itself. Mainstream science keeps these oddities at arm's length. Some are locked away in museum basements, tagged with "requires further study." Others vanish into private collections, leaving behind only blurry photographs and contested testimonies. This pattern, find, dismiss, forget, has played out enough times that you begin to wonder whether it is caution or fear that guides the hand. Because if any of these out-of-place fossils are genuine, they imply something unthinkable. Not only did an earlier civilization master technology, they may have mastered life. And in doing so, they would have left the same stubborn traces we do. Altered DNA in the fossil record. Isotopic signatures in the bones of their creations. The Silurian Hypothesis teaches you to read stone like a ledger. In that ledger, these fossils are not just strange entries. They are line items, written in an unfamiliar hand. And if you learn to read them, they start to sound less like accidents and more like the residue of intent. If fossils are the handwriting of life, minerals are the planet's long-term memory. They remember in ways life cannot, in crystalline lattices, in trapped gas bubbles, in the impurities that should not be there, and some of those impurities are not accidents. Deep in Greenland's ice cores, scientists have found layers dusted with metallic particles, not the kind carried by wind from deserts, but alloys so uniform they suggest smelting. They sit like punctuation marks in the ice, each marking an abrupt change in atmospheric chemistry. The ice remembers the heat, the smoke, the fallout. It does not remember who lit the fire. In Australian zircon crystals more than 4 billion years old, there are ratios of certain isotopes, xenon, krypton, that match the byproducts of nuclear fission. The official explanations reach for meteor impacts or volcanic processes, but the match is too clean, the signal too much like the controlled reactions we engineer today. And then there are the minerals themselves, compounds that nature does not make. In our time, they include plastics degraded into microfragments, aluminum alloys that resist corrosion, or rare earth element clusters from electronics. If we vanished tomorrow, these would persist for millions of years in sediments, their molecular structures intact. And in certain strata from the distant past, researchers have found mineral assemblages that behave in ways no known geology can explain. Conductivity too high, melting points too low, crystals seeded with metallic filaments as thin as hair. The Silurian Hypothesis forces you to see these anomalies not as isolated curiosities, but as a language, a code written in the stubborn materials that refuse to dissolve back into the planet. A code that can survive tectonic drift, ice ages, and extinction events. Look at the Oklo region in Gabon, Africa. There, in 1972, scientists discovered that a uranium deposit had undergone sustained nuclear fission 2 billion years ago. The consensus is that it was a natural nuclear reactor, a rare alignment of conditions, but its efficiency, its burn pattern, the way it cycled on and off, it all reads like a designed system. If nature can mimic our technology so perfectly, or if technology can hide inside natural explanations, how many other sites like Oklo have we walked past without a second glance? Even the colors in certain minerals carry stories. Layers of clay tinged with iridium tell of impacts from space. But what if the layer was rich in palladium or platinum group metals in ratios matching industrial refining? What if the magnetic signature in an iron deposit shows it was heated evenly to thousands of degrees, not in a volcano, but in something like a furnace the size of a city? When you start looking at minerals as messages, you realize the Earth is littered with sealed envelopes. Most are blank, but every so often, you find one with writing inside, and the handwriting is not ours. Long before the word civilization was spoken, stories were told. They began as whispers around fires, carved into stone, painted on cave walls, and hidden within those stories are blueprints, descriptions of tools, structures, and machines far beyond the capabilities of the people who told them. From the Dogon of Mali came tales of visitors who taught astronomy, naming invisible stars that modern telescopes would only later confirm. In the highlands of Peru, legends speak of Viracocha, a bearded figure who arrived after a great flood, rebuilding cities and teaching stonecraft so precise that even a razor blade cannot pass between the fitted blocks. Across Polynesia, chants recall navigators from an earlier age who mapped the entire ocean using instruments that could see the wind. Mainstream history treats these figures as gods, culture heroes, or allegories for the dawn of agriculture. But the Silurian Hypothesis invites another possibility. What if they were memories, dimmed and distorted by time, of a technological species that once shaped the world before vanishing into it? If such a species existed millions of years ago, only fragments of their influence could survive. the skills they passed to human hands, the inexplicable alignments in architecture, the uncanny jumps in knowledge that appear in the archaeological record like steps cut into a cliff. Consider the pyramids of Giza. We are told they date to 4,500 years ago, built by the ancient Egyptians using copper tools and human labor. Yet their precise alignment to true north, their internal shafts aimed at specific stars, and their complex internal resonance patterns hint at design principles that echo across distant continents and older sites. If another civilization had mapped the sky long before, and if their knowledge was somehow preserved or rediscovered, then the Egyptian achievement may be both a masterpiece and a memory. The same pattern appears in South America, where megalithic structures at Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo use stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, shaped with compound angles and interlocking faces, techniques unknown to the smaller, later structures that surround them. In Japan's underwater Yonaguni monument, the terraces and platforms suggest the ghost of an engineering tradition that may have been drowned, not forgotten. When knowledge survives a collapse, it does not always survive intact. Skills can be passed without understanding, like a child reciting a poem they cannot translate. The ancient engineer's legacy may live on in myths, rituals, and impossible construction methods, stripped of their original purpose, but still carrying the signature of their originators. You begin to see these legends not as fantasies, but as the shadows of a vanished order, a species that mastered energy, materials, and perhaps even planetary engineering, then disappeared so completely that only their fingerprints remain. And if they could,
vanish without a trace. But for whispers and stones, what does that say about us?
Every civilization tells the story of an ending. Sometimes it is a slow unraveling, crops failing, cities emptying, languages fading into silence. Other times it is a single moment, a day or a night, when the sky itself turned against the world. If there was a civilization before us, something ended it, and the earth remembers endings in scars you can still touch. In the rock record, some layers are gentle, sediments laid down grain by grain. Others are violent, a thin band of ash laced with shocked quartz. The mineral grains fractured by pressures found only in nuclear blasts or asteroid impacts. Above that band, the fossils change. Whole species vanish, new ones appear. That sharp line is a signature of catastrophe. 66 million years ago, the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary was written in iridium, a metal rare on Earth but common in asteroids. We are told this marks the impact that ended the dinosaurs. But in other epochs, the Permian extinction, the Paleocene-Eocene warming, the trigger is less clear. Some layers show evidence of abrupt global heating, oceans turning anoxic, strange chemical spikes with no obvious volcanic source. If the Silurian hypothesis is correct, a global cataclysm could erase almost all physical traces of an industrial species. Buildings, roads, and machines would be gone in tens of thousands of years. Within a million years, only chemical fingerprints would remain, smeared into the geological record. A large enough disaster, an asteroid, a runaway climate event, even a self-inflicted nuclear exchange would finish the erasure. Flood myths from every continent tell of waters rising to swallow the land. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica record abrupt sea level jumps, walls of meltwater pouring into the oceans as ice sheets collapsed, entire coastlines drowned. If a pre-human civilization had built near the shore, its heartlands would now lie beneath hundreds of meters of water, buried under layers of silt. There is another kind of catastrophe, one born from within. A species that harnesses immense energy may eventually lose control of it. On Mars, vast scars cut across the surface hint at ancient megafloods, perhaps from the rupture of underground reservoirs. On Earth, we know that climate systems can shift in decades, not millennia, when pushed beyond a threshold. The result is chaos. Storms that strip the land bare, deserts that swallow farmland, oceans that suffocate. The truth is brutal. A global cataclysm is not only possible, It is probable over geological timescales. And if one happened before, the only reason we might suspect it now is because certain anomalies refuse to blend in with the rest of the stone. A line of ash here, a spike of carbon there, a silence in the fossil record where once there was abundance. If we could stand in that lost age's final moments, we might see a sky turning
but the last fires of a dying world. And as the darkness closed in, perhaps they, like us, wondered whether anything of them would remain. We are told the story begins in the Nile Valley around 4,500 years ago when the first Great Pyramids rose under the command of Egypt's pharaohs. Massive limestone blocks stacked into geometry so precise that even modern engineers study them in awe. But what if these were not the first? What if they were echoes, the revival of an older blueprint? Across the world, structures with the same unmistakable form appear. Stepped platforms in Mesopotamia, temple mountains in Cambodia, truncated pyramids in Mesoamerica, and conical mounds in West Africa. Official history explains this as convergent evolution, separate cultures finding the same solution to architectural needs. But the Silurian Hypothesis urges you to ask, was there a deeper memory, a design carried forward from a civilization so ancient that its name is lost? In Indonesia, the site of Gunung Padang hides beneath a grassy hill. For decades, it was thought to be a natural mound crowned with later stone terraces. But recent geophysical surveys reveal deep chambers and layered stonework extending far below the surface, some possibly dating back more than 20,000 years. If that's true, it predates known agriculture and raises the possibility that the hill itself is an ancient buried pyramid. In Bolivia, the Acapana Pyramid at Tiahuanacu shows evidence of advanced drainage systems and precision-cut stone blocks weighing over 100 tons. Its builders remain unknown. In China, near Xi'an, dozens of massive earthen pyramids stand in silence, their origins veiled by restricted access and sparse excavation. Even more mysterious are the underwater pyramids reported near Yonaguni in Japan and in the Bay of Campeche off the Yucatan coast. Geometric shapes resting on the seafloor align to cardinal directions. Some researchers propose that these alignments are more than ceremonial. Many pyramids share astronomical orientations, matching solstices, equinoxes, or the rising of specific stars. In Egypt, the Giza pyramids align with Orion's belt. In Mexico, El Castillo at Chichen Itza casts the shadow of a serpent during equinox sunsets. If such alignments existed before recorded history, they could be remnants of a sky-watching tradition inherited from an earlier global culture. The engineering puzzles are harder to explain away. In several pyramid sites, granite or basalt blocks are shaped with a precision and smoothness resembling machine work. Tool marks, where visible, do not match copper chisels. Joints are so tight that they resist the insertion of a blade. In Egypt's Great Pyramid, internal shafts connect to the exterior at precise angles, some pointing to stars as they appeared thousands of years earlier. If an earlier civilization had mastered large-scale stone construction, their monuments could survive in some form for millions of years, though erosion, burial, and tectonic shifts would disguise them as hills, ridges, or naturals. The first pyramids may simply be the first rediscoveries, built by humans who inherited fragments of a forgotten plan. And here lies the unsettling thought. If those plans came from a civilization erased in deep time, then we are not looking at the beginning of architecture, only its most recent rebirth. When history fades, memory becomes myth. And myths, despite their shifting shapes, can carry truths longer than stone. They move through generations like coded messages, sometimes altered, sometimes disguised, but never fully erased. If there was a civilization before ours, perhaps its final echoes are not buried in rock, but spoken in the oldest stories we still tell. Across the world, creation tales speak of a time when beings from the sky, or the sea brought knowledge to the first people. The Sumerians wrote of the Apkallu, sage-like figures who emerged from the water to teach writing, architecture, and agriculture. In Mesoamerica, the Maya told of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who arrived after a great flood to restore order. The Maori recall Tawaki, a hero who climbed to the heavens to retrieve the wisdom of the gods. Stripped of their divine costumes, these figures resemble the vanished engineers, bearers of advanced knowledge in astronomy, navigation, and construction. Their gifts often appear suddenly in the archaeological record, with no clear developmental path. Farming techniques, stone-cutting skills, and star maps seem to arrive fully formed, as if remembered rather than invented. The flood itself is a recurring character, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical deluge, from the Hopi stories of successive worlds destroyed by water to the Hindu pralaya. Civilizations are wiped clean and begin again. In the Silurian Hypothesis framework, such myths could be cultural fossils, distorted recollections of real catastrophes that ended earlier ages of intelligence. Some myths preserve details too technical to ignore. Polynesian chants speak of measuring the horizon with a cord, a phrase modern navigators recognize as a form of spherical trigonometry. The Dogon of Mali described the orbit of Sirius B, a white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye. Norse legends speak of a bridge between worlds, Bifrost, often depicted with the colors of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is possible, of course, that these are coincidences, that human imagination stumbled onto these patterns unaided. But when the same motifs appear on islands, separated by oceans, in languages that share no ancestry, the possibility of a shared source begins to surface. Over millennia, the identity of that source would blur. Teachers become gods, technologies become magic, historical events become cosmic dramas. And yet, hidden beneath the embellishment, the outline remains. Someone came before, someone fell, and we, unknowingly, inherited their fragments. The Silurian Hypothesis warns that if our civilization were erased, our own myths might follow the same path. Satellites could become stars that fell from heaven. Skyscrapers could become mountains built by gods. Our names, languages, and maps could vanish, leaving only story-shaped shadow of gods who taught humans to build. You have to wonder, are they fiction? Or are they the last surviving voices of a world the Earth has already forgotten? Some discoveries never make it to the textbooks. They live in the margins of field reports, in whispered conversations at conferences, or in collections where the public is not allowed. Officially, these finds are dismissed as misidentifications, contamination, or outright hoaxes. But if you trace them, a pattern begins to emerge, one that points toward a chapter of history someone would rather leave unread. In 1973, miners in Oklahoma unearthed a chunk of coal that broke open to reveal an iron pot embedded inside. The coal seam was estimated at over 300 million years old. The find was photographed, documented, and then quietly shelved. In Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, a hiker discovered a rock with what appeared to be a section of finely machined metal gear fused into it. Tests suggested the rock was millions of years old. The sample vanished before independent analysis could be done. Archaeologists in South America have long known of megalithic walls buried beneath Incan and pre-Incan layers, stonework of such precision that it makes later construction look crude by comparison. Yet excavations are often halted, permits denied, and sites left unexplored. In Egypt, sealed chambers beneath the Sphinx, detected by ground-penetrating radar, remain officially off-limits. When questioned, authorities offer practical reasons: preservation, funding, safety, but the effect is the same. Evidence stays hidden. The Silurian Hypothesis offers an unsettling rationale. If a pre-human civilization existed, its most telling artifacts might be those least explainable within the accepted timeline. And those are precisely the ones most likely to be locked away. Even in open excavations, inconvenient artifacts are sometimes reclassified until they fit the existing narrative. A worked stone found in the wrong strata becomes a geofact, shaped by natural forces. A metal object too old for metallurgy becomes a mineral concretion. The data is not falsified, it is reframed until it stops asking dangerous questions. In private collections, the rules are looser. Wealthy collectors have displayed items said to be from unknown cultures, featuring motifs and construction methods not matching any known civilization. Without provenance or peer review, these objects remain in limbo, tantalizing, unverifiable, and beyond the reach of public science. This is the shadow world of archaeology, not the romantic treasure hunts of popular media, but a quiet filtration system deciding which discoveries enter the story and which do not. And if we accept that power structures in our own time have reasons to suppress certain truths, is it so hard to believe they might do the same if confronted with evidence of a civilization that could upend our understanding of human uniqueness? Perhaps the most dangerous discovery would not be a single artifact, but a chain of them. Anomalies scattered across continents and epochs, all pointing to the same impossible conclusion: that we are not the first. Such a conclusion would not just rewrite history, it would redefine our place in the universe. And so the forbidden archaeology remains forbidden, its pieces scattered, hidden, or dismissed, waiting for someone willing to assemble them into the shape of a world we were never meant to see. If we are not the first, then the ground beneath our feet is more than just the stage of human history, it is a palimpsest. Every era writes its story in dust and fire, and every new story is etched over the ashes of the one before. We walk on erased worlds without knowing it. Think about what the Silurian Hypothesis really asks, not whether such a civilization existed, but whether we would even know if it had. The answer is the most humbling part. In the vast span of geological time, a century of machines, a millennium of cities, even 10 millennia of empires is barely a flicker. Erosion, tectonics, ocean rise, these are the patient editors of Earth's memory, stripping every monument, scattering every archive, until only chemical ghosts remain. If something intelligent thrived here millions of years ago, its monuments could now be mountains, its libraries compressed into crystals, its cities reduced to faint mineral signatures and cores drilled from the seafloor. We would never find their names. We might never even know their shape. We would see only the curve of a graph bending twice, once in our time and once in a time so remote it feels fictional. And then there is the mirror. If it happened before, it can happen again. Civilizations are not immortal. Ours is no exception. We can imagine our ruins, but the truth is harsher. In a million years, there may be no ruins left to imagine. Only the stubborn markers, a thin layer of plastics, a spike of carbon isotopes, an unnatural alloy that refuses to weather, will whisper that we were ever here. In that distant future, perhaps another intelligence will rise. They will dig, measure, and theorize. They will argue over anomalies in the rock record, invent names for us, wonder at the sharpness of our rise and the suddenness of our disappearance. They may never know the details, but they will know something was here before them. And in their myths, they may turn us into gods, giants, or monsters. That is the final weight of the Silurian Hypothesis. Not that it proves we are not the first, but that it reminds us how easily even the greatest achievements vanish. If we are not the first, then the Earth has already turned the page on a story like ours, and one day it will do so again. And when that day comes, perhaps our last surviving message will be the same one we have been trying to read in stone, metal, and myth for so long. We were here before you.